I'm Russell Hayes, 58 years old, living in Fort Collins, Colorado. I've spent 30 years as an HVAC technician. My wife, Denise, is 55 and works as a hospital administrator. We raised 2 daughters, Natalie and Brooke, both grown and living in different states now. For most people, an empty nest sounds peaceful. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just quiet enough for problems to echo. The strange thing started on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I came home early after finishing a service call across town. Denise wasn't home yet. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a large cardboard package sitting behind the trash bins near the garage wall. That caught my attention immediately. We rarely ordered anything that large, and Denise was usually obsessive about bringing deliveries inside before the weather got to them. The shipping label had our address. But the name wasn't ours. It belonged to a woman named Evelyn Carter. I figured the delivery company had made a mistake. No big deal. I carried the package into the garage and texted Denise. "Did you see this package?" Her response arrived almost instantly. "Leave it alone. I'll explain later." Now, after 33 years of marriage, I know the difference between a normal message and a message someone sends while nervous. That text was nervous. Very nervous. When Denise got home, I asked about it casually. She froze for half a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. "It's just a delivery mistake," she said while avoiding eye contact. "Then why not call the shipping company?" "I've been busy." That answer didn't fit. Denise was many things. Busy, certainly. Forgetful? Never. Over dinner, she changed the subject 3 separate times whenever I mentioned the package. By bedtime, my instincts were awake. Not jealousy. Not anger. Just observation. Men my age learn something important. Panic creates mistakes. Patience reveals facts. The next morning, I checked the garage before leaving for work. The package was gone. I assumed Denise had returned it. Case closed. Or so I thought. 3 days later, I stopped by a hardware store after work. While loading supplies into my truck, I saw something familiar. Very familiar. The exact same package. Sitting in the back of Denise's SUV. She hadn't returned it. She had moved it. That was the moment a small question became a large one. That evening, I said nothing. Instead, I watched. Over the next week, Denise made several unexplained trips across town. She took phone calls outside. She seemed distracted during conversations. Not guilty. Worried. There's a difference. One Saturday morning, I mentioned Evelyn Carter again. The color drained from Denise's face. "What do you know about her?" I asked calmly. "Nobody," she answered too quickly. That answer bothered me more than if she'd refused to answer at all. Because now I knew one thing for certain. Denise knew exactly who Evelyn Carter was. And she desperately didn't want me asking questions. I thought I finally understood what was happening. I was wrong. The first real clue arrived 2 days later, hidden inside an old family photograph that should never have been connected to that mysterious package at all. The following Monday, I couldn't stop thinking about that photograph. I had found it by accident while looking for a warranty document in our home office. The picture was old, at least 20 years old. Denise and I were standing at a community fundraiser in Fort Collins. Around us were a dozen people whose names I'd mostly forgotten. Mostly. One face caught my attention. A woman standing near the edge of the photo. The back of the picture contained several handwritten names. And one of them was Evelyn. Not Carter. Just Evelyn. My stomach tightened. This wasn't proof of anything. But it was the first connection between my wife and the mysterious package. That evening, I placed the photo on the kitchen counter. Denise walked in, saw it, and immediately stopped. Again, only for a second. Again, long enough. You remember her? I asked. Her eyes stayed on the picture. A little. How little? She folded her arms. Russell, why are you digging into this? Notice what she didn't say. She didn't answer the question. Men, would that have bothered you? Because it sure bothered me. I stayed calm. I'm not digging. I'm trying to understand why my wife gets nervous every time I mention a package that doesn't belong to us. Denise looked exhausted. Not angry. Not defensive. Exhausted. That was new. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she quietly said, "Please trust me." Trust. Funny word. Trust isn't blind obedience. Trust is confidence built on truth. And right now, truth was in short supply. The next day, I decided to gather facts instead of theories. I started reconstructing a timeline. Denise's unusual behavior had started about 6 weeks earlier. The package appeared 3 weeks ago. The private phone calls started around the same time. Then I noticed something else. Several withdrawals from our joint checking account. Nothing dramatic. A few $100s here. A few hundred there. The amounts weren't large enough to cause financial concern. But they were unusual. Denise and I had always discussed expenses. Always. That evening, I asked her directly. Why are there withdrawals I don't recognize? She looked down at her coffee mug. I needed money for something. For what? It's complicated. There it was again. Another answer that wasn't an answer. I wasn't interested in winning an argument. I wanted facts. The following afternoon, I met my longtime friend Gerald for lunch. We'd known each other nearly 30 years. I casually mentioned Evelyn Carter. The reaction surprised me. Gerald frowned immediately. Where did you hear that name? That got my attention. You know her? A long time ago. From where? He hesitated. Then he leaned back in his chair. Russell, if we're talking about the same Evelyn, she disappeared from local circles years ago. What do you mean disappeared? No idea. People just stopped seeing her. That conversation followed me home. Now the mystery had grown larger. A package. Secret withdrawals. Private phone calls. An old photograph. And a woman who seemed connected to my wife but had somehow vanished from everyone's life. That night, around 11, Denise's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Then she rushed outside to answer it. I watched from the living room window. The porch light illuminated her face. For the first time since this began, I saw something unmistakable. Fear. Not guilt. Fear. When she came back inside, her eyes were red. She claimed she was tired and went straight to bed. But after she fell asleep, I noticed something sticking out of her purse. A folded document. At the top was a name I now knew far too well. Evelyn Carter. I had only scratched the surface. What I discovered inside that document the next morning changed the entire direction of my investigation. The next morning, I woke before Denise and sat alone at the kitchen table. The folded document from her purse was still on my mind. I wasn't interested in snooping through every corner of my wife's life. After 33 years of marriage, I believed in respect. But I also believed that when facts start disappearing, a husband has a responsibility to understand what is happening inside his own family. So when Denise left early for work, I made a decision. I opened the document. What I found wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a bank statement. It wasn't a legal notice. It was paperwork from a medical facility. Most of the information was covered by privacy forms, but one detail stood out immediately. Patient, Evelyn Carter. Emergency contact, Denise Hayes. I read that line 3 times. Denise wasn't casually helping a stranger. She was listed as the primary emergency contact. That meant an ongoing relationship. A significant one. Yet in all our years together, I had never once heard Denise mention Evelyn Carter. Not once. Now I had more questions than answers. That evening, I didn't confront her. Instead, I continued building the timeline. The package had appeared shortly after the first hospital paperwork. The bank withdrawals began around the same period. The late-night calls followed. Everything pointed toward a single issue. Denise was helping Evelyn. The real question was why she felt compelled to hide it from me. Over the next several days, I started revisiting old memories. Sometimes answers aren't hidden in new evidence. Sometimes they're buried in things you've forgotten. I pulled out old photo albums from the basement. Birthday parties. Community events. School fundraisers. Then I found another photograph. This one was older than the first. Denise and Evelyn were standing together, smiling like close friends. Not acquaintances. Friends. The date on the back was 26 years old. Now I knew Denise had lied when she claimed she barely remembered her. The discovery bothered me less than the deception itself. A marriage can survive problems. It struggles when truth becomes selective. That Saturday, I visited Denise's older sister, Cheryl. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply asked a few questions. The moment I mentioned Evelyn's name, Cheryl became quiet. Very quiet. Then she sighed. I was wondering when you'd find out. My pulse quickened. Find out what? Cheryl looked toward the window for several seconds. Russell, Denise should have told you herself. Told me what? She shook her head. I'm not the person who should explain it. That answer confirmed everything. There was a secret. A real one. And multiple people knew about it. When I got home, Denise was sitting alone on the back patio. She looked tired. Older somehow. As if she had been carrying something heavy for years. I sat across from her. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, I placed the 2 photographs on the table between us. Then I placed the medical document beside them. Her face turned pale. She understood immediately. The questions had finally caught up with the answers. For a long moment, she stared at the evidence. Then tears appeared in her eyes. Not dramatic tears. The kind people shed when they realize a burden can no longer be hidden. I never wanted it to happen this way, she whispered. That was the first honest sentence I'd heard in weeks. I looked her directly in the eyes. Then tell me the truth. Denise opened her mouth. Closed it. And lowered her head. What she said next revealed that Evelyn wasn't simply an old friend. She was connected to a painful chapter of our family's history that I had never known existed. Denise sat silently for several seconds, staring at the photographs spread across the patio table. The evening air felt unusually cold. Finally, she took a deep breath. Evelyn was my closest friend before we got married. That part didn't shock me. The next part did. 27 years ago, she went through a terrible time. Her husband left her. She lost her home. She became isolated. I listened without interrupting. When we started raising Natalie and Brooke, life became busy. We slowly lost contact. Her voice trembled. Then 6 weeks ago, the hospital called me. The hospital? I asked. She nodded. Evelyn had listed me as her emergency contact years ago. Somehow the information was never updated. Now pieces were beginning to fit together. The phone calls. The paperwork. The withdrawals. The package. But not the secrecy. Not yet. What happened to her? I asked. Denise looked down. She's sick, Russell. The words landed heavily. Not because illness is unusual at our age. Because fear had been written all over Denise's face for weeks. And now I understood why. Evelyn has no children. No close family nearby. No one helping her. I stayed quiet. She continued. When I saw her again, I barely recognized her. Tears formed again. She looked alone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me most. Why hide all this from me? That question hit harder than anything else. Denise's shoulders sagged. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of helping someone? She shook her head. No. Ashamed of what it reminded me of. I waited. After 3 decades of marriage, I've learned that silence often invites honesty better than pressure. Finally, she spoke. When the girls moved away, I started struggling. The admission surprised me. Denise had always appeared strong. Organized. Capable. Unshakable. Apparently I wasn't seeing the whole picture. I felt like I was losing my purpose. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to admit that to anyone. Especially not to you. Now I was beginning to see the real crisis. This wasn't about Evelyn. Not really. Evelyn had simply exposed something Denise had been hiding from herself. Fear. Fear of aging. Fear of becoming unnecessary. Fear of entering the next chapter of life without knowing who she was. Then came the final piece. The package contained photo albums and personal papers from Evelyn's apartment, Denise said quietly. Why bring them here? Because she was preparing for surgery and was terrified something might happen to her. I felt my assumptions collapsing one by one. No affair. No secret account. No betrayal. Just 2 frightened women carrying different kinds of pain. One facing illness. The other facing the loss of identity. Yet one problem remained. Denise, I said carefully, you still lied to me. She nodded immediately. No excuses. No arguments. No deflection. Just acceptance. I know. For the first time since this started, she looked directly into my eyes. I was so focused on protecting everyone else that I stopped being honest with my husband. That sentence hung between us. Heavy. Painful. True. I thought I finally had the full story. Then Denise revealed one final detail about the withdrawals and a promise she had secretly made to Evelyn years ago, a promise that would force both of us to make an important decision together. Denise wiped her eyes and took a slow breath. There's one more thing you need to know. I nodded. Tell me. She folded her hands together. The money wasn't for medical bills. That immediately got my attention. Then what was it for? Denise looked toward the yard before answering. Years ago, Evelyn and I made a promise. I waited. If either of us ever ended up completely alone, the other would help. Not financially forever. Not recklessly. Just enough to keep the person standing. When Evelyn's health declined, she fell behind on several essential expenses. Denise had quietly helped cover them. The withdrawals suddenly made sense. Every one of them. What were you planning to do? I asked. I didn't know, she admitted. I was trying to solve everything myself. There it was. The real mistake. Not helping a friend. Not spending the money. Trying to carry the burden alone. For weeks, I had suspected secrets. In a way, I was right. But the secret wasn't another man, hidden debt, or some double life. The secret was fear. Fear had convinced Denise that honesty would create conflict. Fear had convinced her she had to manage everything without me. Fear had grown in silence. And silence had nearly damaged a marriage that didn't need to be damaged. I leaned back and thought about the last several weeks. The suspicious package. The late-night calls. The evasive answers. The missing truth. Then I thought about the woman sitting across from me. The woman who had stood beside me through layoffs, sick parents, mortgage payments, raising daughters, and every challenge life had thrown at us. One mistake didn't erase 33 years. But it did require accountability. "Here's what happens next," I said. Denise looked up. "We stop keeping important things from each other." She nodded immediately. "We review finances together." Another nod. "And if Evelyn needs help, we decide as a team what that help looks like." At that point, Denise broke down completely. Not from guilt. From relief. For weeks she had been carrying a problem that was too large for one person. Now she wasn't carrying it alone. The following weekend, we visited Evelyn together. For the first time, there were no secrets. No half-truths. No hidden phone calls. Just honesty. Evelyn turned out to be a kind, proud woman who hated asking anyone for help. The package had contained family photographs, letters, and memories she was afraid would disappear if something happened during surgery. Over the following months, Denise and I helped where we reasonably could. More importantly, we talked. Really talked. About aging. About purpose. About the empty house. About fears we had both kept hidden. I admitted that retirement scared me more than I liked to admit. Denise admitted that losing daily involvement in our daughters' lives had left a hole she didn't know how to fill. Those conversations changed our marriage. Not because they were easy. Because they were honest. We created a financial transparency plan. We scheduled regular walks together. We became intentional about discussing concerns before they turned into secrets. Looking back, the package was never the real problem. The real problem was two good people quietly carrying worries they should have shared. Today, our marriage is stronger than it was before all of this happened. Not because trust was never challenged. Because trust was rebuilt through truth. I've learned something valuable at 58. Respect matters more than winning. Assumptions are dangerous. And forgiveness requires strength, not weakness. If you're married and something feels wrong, don't rush to conclusions. Gather facts. Stay calm. Ask questions. Then listen. Sometimes the truth is very different from the story fear creates in your head. And sometimes saving a marriage starts with two people finally sitting down at the same table and choosing honesty over pride. What happens when a suspicious secret turns out to be a cry for help instead of a betrayal? One husband refuses to react in anger and discovers a truth that changes everything. His patience saves far more than a marriage.